Okay, in a few seconds we'll be going live.
Ready?
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. Now, before we begin, can I please request you to type in yes if you can see my screen and if you can hear me okay. So you will notice there's a chat box at the bottom of the screen. Could you type in your responses there, please? Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So today's session is called Book Club Café, and this is a project that won not one but two English Australia Awards in September last year. The first award was for professional practice, and the second one was for innovation. This is a very special project that is being presented today by Jose, Lara, and Leslie Spear. They're both teachers at Macquarie University English Language Centre, and they started the Book Club Café because they recognized the need, the crucial need actually, to develop extensive reading skills among their students. And we all know how crucial that is for our students to be able to read a lot. Now, with this project, the amazing thing, and as Leslie and Jose will tell you today, is how cheaply it can be set up within centers and how it engages students in a fun and relaxed way and gets them reading more and acquiring more vocabulary. So Jose and Leslie, without further ado, I'll hand over to you now.
Hi, thanks, Aparna, and thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. We really hope you can get something useful out of this that you could use in your own teaching contexts. Also, thank you to English Australia for giving us this opportunity to present today. We've actually presented on this topic already at UECA and at the TESOL Colloquium last year and at IATEFL conference in Manchester last year, so apologies if you've heard some of this before. We're also very glad that it's a webinar today, and you can't see us because we're both having seriously bad hair days. As Aparna mentioned earlier, if you have a question while we're speaking, please type it in, and at the end we'll have some time for questions. So what we plan to do today is explain to you what the Book Club Café project was all about, but the second part of it will be where we provide updates and latest developments, and we also plan to reveal our plans for the future, what we're going to do in the future with extensive reading. So first of all, what is the Book Club Café? It's an extensive reading project. Now, extensive reading is not new, neither are book clubs. But what we've tried to do here is just put together a few ingredients in a system which works. That's why we call it a recipe. It's like mixing up the ingredients in a slightly different way. It's a complete package so that we think that it's easily transferable to other contexts. It consists of really two sections. There's an in-class session where the students participate in a relaxed cafe-like atmosphere. We're really exploring learning as a social activity, and the students just sit and chat and join in with the Book Club Cafe sessions. During those sessions, they share the reading which they've done outside of class time. So the reading is actually taking place outside of class. We've actually been doing this now for more than 2 years at the Macquarie University English Language Centre, and over that time it's evolved and changed and developed and continues to do so. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. As Aparna mentioned, we won both awards two awards last year, and we were really thrilled and really excited about that, and it sort of enthused us to continue in experimenting and trying new things. Now, the data, which you'll see in a moment, shows that it does work. We conducted an exploratory practice study last year, and we have some data to show you, and also to show you how it can be transferred in other situations. So, I mean, first of all, really, why did we start this? Why did we start to do it? And I think, as Aparna's just mentioned, we think we're all aware of the critical role which reading plays in developing language skills. We thought that, in an ESL context, as we are here in Australia, there's sort of a perception that our students have lots of opportunities. They're surrounded by language, they can go out there and do lots of reading by themselves. But we felt that this wasn't actually happening. A lot of students are probably staying in L1 outside of the classroom. There was also a perception on the students' part, we felt, that reading was difficult, too difficult for them to do. Some comments we received from students were, I can't read in English. They'd say this in English, but they'd say, I can't read. They didn't know how to choose appropriate texts to read, and we needed to intervene there. But I think one of the main points was that they didn't understand the value of reading. A lot of students just couldn't see the point. Perhaps they didn't like reading in their first language, they hadn't developed a habit, they didn't enjoy it, and they couldn't see a connection between reading and developing their language skills. On top of all of this, I think we're facing a worldwide phenomenon of people throughout the whole planet reading less. In this digital era, reading seems to be becoming a lost art. And we felt we were really up against it and tried to encourage students to do more reading in this digital age. So that was really where we started. This was our starting point. I'm going to hand you over to Jose now, and he'll talk about a questionnaire we conducted with our students early on in the project.
Thank you, Leslie. So as Leslie mentioned before, this Book Club Café started as an exploratory practice study. And we knew that the students were not doing enough reading outside the classroom. So we conducted this questionnaire in the first 4 teaching blocks of a project, which is about 20 weeks. And we conducted this across 258 students from both general English and academic English students. And the results, even though we knew that they were not reading enough, the results were not surprising, but we were shocked by what we found out after we saw the numbers coming in. As you can see in the bar chart coming up now, we asked the students how often they learned and how their reading habits were in terms of L1 and also in English. And we asked them if they've read every day, 2 or 3 times a week, once a month, or almost never. As you can see in the graph here, we had a few students saying that they actually read every day. We're not sure if they actually just answered that to make us happy or just to impress us. But if you look at the other side of the graph, we can see that in the blue bars representing the general English students, almost 75% said that they read once a month or almost never, whereas academic English students reported 60% of them said that they read almost never or just once a month. So after these shocking results, we had a reason to conduct the project. Even though this is a snapshot of what was going on in the center 2 years ago with our students, showing how much they were reading, after having presented at different places, different schools here in Sydney, we get the same impression from other teachers saying that their students, they also believe they're reading not enough outside the classroom. So we could dare to say that this is actually a situation in the ESL industry and that our students are not reading enough, especially in the ESL context where we work at the moment. So based on this, we said we have a good opportunity here to develop a project and to help our students to read more. So now I'm going to leave you with Leslie, who will tell you a bit more why extensive reading and why we decided to do the project. So up to you, Leslie, now.
Thanks, Jose. Look, there is overwhelming evidence that reading is the way to go. It was difficult to choose a few quotations that we could give you, but just in case anyone out there is not convinced, we thought we'd spend a couple of minutes just going over it. Christine Nuttall, back in 1996, said that the best way to improve your knowledge of a foreign language is to go and live among its speakers. Yes, they're doing that here in Australia, but are they actually using the language? And we've demonstrated that in many cases they aren't. The next best way is to read extensively in it. And next we've got a quotation from Bamford and Day, also known as Day and Bamford. Good things happen to students who read a great deal in the new language. They go on to describe those good things at length. I haven't provided all of them, but here to bore you with a long quotation, but it does actually cover almost everything, you know, from reading, grammar, listening, develops all of their skills, and also writing. Of course, many of you will remember Bamford and Day were the pair who came up with the 10 principles of extensive reading, sometimes called the 10 commandments of extensive reading, and I'll talk about a little bit about that later on. Also, Alan Maley has stated back in 2005 that extensive reading is perhaps the single most effective way to improve language proficiency. We keep hearing this. Reading is number one. I've heard this so many times at different conferences, professional development courses. So if anyone is still unconvinced, I would ask you to have a look at an article which Rob Waring wrote called The Inescapable Case for Extensive Reading. He actually revisits those 10 principles of Bamford and Day, and basically what we've reached now is the point of determining our own definition of extensive reading. Obviously those principles are still really valuable as guidelines, but there was one controversial one that I wanted to bring up, and that is number 6 on the list. Reading is its own reward. A lot of teachers, I believe, have interpreted this as reading is its own reward, so it's not necessary to follow up. Basically, we can just give them books and say, go and read, and hopefully it will happen, you know, good luck. It doesn't work. And in fact, Richard Day has written a number of articles on the fact that it is essential to monitor what is happening. We have had people say to us after presentations that, yeah, but it's not really extensive reading because, you know, you do follow-up activities and you're sort of somehow damaging it, and that's not what Bamford and Day was saying. But we believe that it was. They actually explain how really important it is that we do monitor, and that's why we have the follow-up sessions in the classroom, which is what we call Book Club Café. So I'm now going to hand back over to Jose, who's going to tell you about the various phases and incarnations of our project.
All right. So just like any exploratory practice study, we went through different phases developing the Book Club Café. In the first phase, we basically followed the traditional approach to reading in the classroom. We provided different graded readers to students. They would take them home, or they would read them in the classroom sometimes, and they would come to class and share what they had actually read. But these activities in the classroom were pretty much prepared by the teachers and were comprehension-based, which meant that the teacher had to read that specific graded reader, come up with a set of questions to see if the students understood or if they actually read the reader, and then do an activity in the classroom. As I said, this is perhaps the traditional way of doing reading in the classroom in different ESL contexts or in different centers. And even though we got some students to read, we felt that this was not working, for us at least. And the reason was because we encountered 3 main problems with this approach. We saw that the variety of text was very limited. We did have a good number of graded readers here in the center, and we used many of them across the different levels we were teaching. But we found that they were not all that relevant to the students. Many of them said, oh, this is boring, I've read this already, I don't like this, is there anything else? So we found that this limitation of text was a big factor for the motivation of the students, which is the second problem we faced. We saw that many of them didn't like reading. Many of them didn't do their reading for the Inclass session, which meant that they could not answer the questions, which in the end meant that it was perceived as a waste of time for the teacher and also for the students. But basically, the main problem that we found here was that many of the students did not understand the value or the importance of reading and how through reading they could develop their language skills. So I talked to Leslie, and then we said, Leslie, we need to change something here in this approach. And we were thinking of a way to come up with a selling point to give the students. And this is when we came across a very famous quote from our favorite David Crystal, who since 1996 has been saying that vocabulary is the Everest of language learning.
Hundreds of times, I think you said.
Hundreds of times.
Thousands of times.
We actually, he actually repeated this quote in his presentation at ITEFL conference in Manchester last year. and we were there, and we actually heard it say from himself. So we use this selling point to tell the students, we can show you that through reading, you can improve your vocabulary. And this is what we incorporate in this second phase of a project. Now, in this second phase, we changed two things, and I'm going to show you now. The first change we applied was we went away from the graded readers, the print materials. So what we did instead, we went to the British Council magazine's website, and we printed out short text, different text, up to 20 text for the students to choose from. So in this case, the students were not reading the same text. They all had different text each week, which meant that they could share different stories, different things from what they had read. And instead of coming up with conventional ways of testing them to see what they have been doing, we encourage them to look up for new words in the text that we're reading, and just to bring them to the classroom. And instead of having them to answer questions based on comprehension, we told the students to share the vocabulary they had learned during that week. So this way the students were teaching each other new vocabulary, and we saw that this was actually working. The students were a bit more engaged in the reading process. They had a wider variety of texts, but again, there was something missing, and we encountered other problems as well in this stage. First problem, we had still a limitation of the range of texts. They had a wider variety, but we thought that it was not enough.
Sorry, we were still using just one website, the British Council website.
Yeah, and the problem was that we also encouraged them to find a second text that related to the text that they were given that week. And many of the times they could not find a related text. It was either too difficult, or it was unrelated, or they just didn't come up with anything at all for the following week. So because of these two reasons, motivation was still low. They were not sure why they were reading. They just thought it was a complete compulsory activity in the classroom. And again, they could not find, they didn't have the ability or the tools to find those additional texts. So once again, we sat down over coffee one day and said, Leslie, we need to find another flavor, another ingredient here, another component for Book Club Café. And this is when we went to a professional development session at Macquarie University English Language Center, conducted by Professor Phil Benston, who is a professor of linguistics here at the university. And he introduced us to a new model to learner autonomy, which was the last element that we were looking for the project. In this presentation, we were given to the three-part model, which included the words ability, desire, and freedom. As you can read here in the quote in your screens, for us, the word ability meant for the students to find appropriate text for them to read, the desire to continue reading and acquire that habit of reading as a voluntary activity. But perhaps the most important part was the word freedom. And this was the freedom for them to choose what they wanted to read, when, and also what they wanted to read. Another word important here is the word personal. We found that once the students had the freedom to select what they wanted to read, it became personal. It was relevant to them, and they had ownership of what they were reading. So now that we have the elements that we thought were needed for the Book Club Café, we eventually came up to the third phase. So I hope you have your papers and pens ready for the recipe, because here they come, the ingredients for Book Club Café. And then I'll give information on how to put those ingredients together. So the first ingredient we need, of course, would be reading. And this has to be voluntary reading. And this has to happen outside the classroom. We cannot really use in-class time to have the students read something for just 1 hour, half an hour, because they might think that it's a waste of time and their money as well invested. The second ingredient would be, of course, learner autonomy, the three-part model that I talked about before. We have ability, freedom, and desire. And again, freedom of choice to choose what they want to read. The new ingredient that we added here also is the follow-up activities, the in-class follow-up activities. We went away from the comprehension-based activities to activities that were student-driven, They came up with their own ideas, with their own things, sharing ideas instead of asking them comprehension questions. And we'll give you some more examples of these follow-up activities later on. Actually, later we'll give you some more of these activities in a second. The other ingredient is online reading resources. And we felt that it was an essential ingredient, given the context and the background of our students, quite young, in a very online sort of
savvy. Yeah.
Savvy, online savvy.
They're all digital natives.
Exactly, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. We thought that this was a way to get them to read more. By this, I'm not saying that we need to get rid of graded readers. We still believe that they have a place and a time within the ESL context. But if we want to really engage the students to read more, I think we need to make use of online resources as well. And we later on will give you a list of those resources that you can use with your own students. And last but not least, we needed a relaxed, fun atmosphere, the social setting for them to share these ideas. And we did this by providing them with biscuits, sometimes coffee and juice, some of the requests they had, and also some background music as well.
Yeah.
Now, as we said from the very beginning, we call this a recipe, and these are our ingredients. And we'd like to compare this to a simple and famous chicken soup, where the chicken and the water are essential to make the soup. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a chicken salad, I don't know. So for us, the chicken would be the voluntary reading outside the classroom. It's essential. Of course, this is an extensive reading project. And our water would be the learner autonomy. This is what actually lets the students read and have that freedom to read what they want, when they want, and anywhere they want it as well. Now that we have these ingredients, I'm going to show you what we do in our 5-week teaching blocks here at Macquarie ELC. In the first week, we have a setup session of 1 hour in class. We only do this with new groups, because now that it has been implemented at the center, we have continuing students who know about Book Club Café, so we don't have to explain this again. They just know that in week 1, we'll have our first session. But if we have new students, we introduce Book Club to the new students and explain the importance and the relevance of reading and how they can improve their language skills overall, not only reading. We also introduce them to different online reading websites. And in a minute, I'm going to show you one of the many websites that we use in our Book Club Café, and I'll give you some of the features of the website. As you can see here in the second point, it is called ER Central. In this first session, we also show the students how to select appropriate texts depending on their level and in their interests. And we also guide them on how to record and learn new words as they read new materials every week. Now, let me give you a bit of background about this ER Central website. First of all, this is a free website. It's non-for-profit and also non-commercial, which means that your students and you as teachers as well can log in for free, open your own account. And as you can see in this first picture here, the website provides different sections. We have the reading section, listening, and also vocabulary. We only focused on the reading side, of course, for our project. This website has many, many positive features, and that's why we decided to use it. One of the features is that it has literally thousands of texts available for students or language learners to choose from. They are categorized in 20 different levels of proficiency. So for example, if we have a student who is at a level, let's say 15, based on this website, we tell them that they can actually go below that. The idea is for them to read something that is easy to read and enjoyable, not to challenge them too much. So if they read at a level 10, if they're at level 15, that was okay for us. The texts are also divided into categories. So we have stories for children, for adults, and we also have fiction and non-fiction text here as well. As I said, in the thousands of texts that are available here, when the students click on one of the texts, they can see the number of words they're about to read. So if they think that is too long, they can just go back and select something else. Or if the description of the text, as you can see here, is not appealing to them, they can just choose something else. In this following slide, you can see that at the top of the screen, you will see the total hours reading, which records the amount of time the students spent reading each time. And this for us, Leslie, I think it was very useful because we could actually see how much time they were spending reading. Because in the first stage of the project, we were seeing students who only logged in, clicked out, and just told us they had read. But when we looked at the time, we knew that it was not logical or was very unrealistic of them to do that. Also, the website has a built-in dictionary, which means that the students can right-click on any new word they find, and this way they don't have to interrupt the reading process. Because again, we don't want to make this a burden on the student. We don't want it to be difficult. So if they find any new words there, they can just right-click real quick and find a definition, just continue on reading. These are the benefits for the students. Now, for us teachers, or as we were researchers in the project, one of the good things about the website is that the students can send a report to their teachers. They only need to have your work email, and you will get a report that looks like this. You will have the name of the student, if you want to follow that up, the student number, their emails, but also a summary of how many words they have read so far, and also how many texts they have done until then. And this is what helped us to gather the data to show that the project actually works. In my next slide, I'm going to show you what actually happens in the following weeks of the Book Club Café. As I said, we work in blocks of 5 weeks. So in the remaining 4 weeks, we encourage the students to read outside the classroom. We ask them to read 1 or more text each week, and only to be prepared to bring the vocabulary that they had to share with their classmates in the Book Club Café session later on. And during this time, the teacher only has to encourage and remind the students to read and be ready for the in-class session, which is actually what happens in the classroom, in the actual Book Club Café. As Leslie mentioned before, this is an in-class activity. It usually takes 1 hour, 45 minutes of class time. We tend to have it on a Thursday or Friday at the end of the week, so they can just relax after a hard week of grammar and reading and speaking and all of those activities. So during the session, the students get in small groups of 3 or 4, and they just take their logs out where they keep record of the new words, and they just share the information on the new words they have learned throughout that week. So they teach each other these words. They also get to enjoy a relaxed atmosphere because there's the music and the biscuits. And again, many of the students reported that they felt that they were not in a classroom. They actually felt that they were in a social setting, just sharing new information that they had gathered that week. Perhaps the most important point is that many of the students saw an immediate result. They saw the immediate benefit of reading, and in this case meant that they could see that their vocabulary can increase as a result of reading. And again, the teacher has to do very minimal here, but it doesn't do very much here. They just supervise, walk around, serve as a waiter or a waitress with the biscuits and the drinks. By drinks, I mean the coffee, sorry.
That's right, yes, only coffee.
Yeah,
definitely only coffee.
And the sessions are pretty much run by the students. They're in charge of this hour of class. And this is something else that they report as something that they enjoyed. In my next slide, I'm going to show you some of the outcomes and the results from the data we gathered. At the end of the 5-week teaching block, we conducted more questionnaires, and we also interviewed at the end 258 students, and we could see that 92% of them participated in the project. By this we mean that each student at least read 3 texts in a 5-week time frame, which for us was quite successful, given that many of them had reported before that they read almost never. We also asked them if they think they had read more than before, given that they were participating in the Book Club Café project, and more than 96% of them reported that they felt they read more as a result of being part of it. The last 2 points here that I'm going to show you relate to the freedom of choice and being free to select and do what they want as a result of Book Club Café. And 92% of them reported that they enjoyed having the freedom to select what they wanted to read. And 82%, almost 83%, liked the idea of being in charge of what happens in the Book Club Café. It was just not based on comprehension. They liked teaching each other those new words that they were encountering. In terms of how much they actually read, this new graph that you have here may seem a bit complicated, but I'll try to summarize it. As you can see in the third row from down up, you can see that more than a quarter of the students read between 12 and 17 texts, which again, compared to the numbers we got in the first questionnaire that we conducted, we saw that there was a very positive result. But when we look at the first 5 bars on top, we can see that if we add all those numbers, almost 25% of the students read between 24 to 51 texts. And again, don't forget, this is only in 5 weeks of the teaching block. One of the students from Korea, who is the person who read 51 texts, the students, her classmates, were impressed and asked her how she managed to read so many texts in only 5 weeks. And she said, easy. I just got the habit of reading 1 text in my iPhone or in my iPad before going to bed. Just 1 text a night. That's all it takes. And this is what we wanted to do with the project, to create that habit of reading in the students. Now, let's just want to give you some more feedback that we got from our students after we conducted the questionnaires. So, all yours, Leslie.
Thanks, Jose. Look, one of the questions we're often asked is how can we actually establish that this works? And some people are wondering if we're actually able to quantify an improvement in the students' language skills. We feel that we have achieved that. The students feel that, and we have reports from teachers that they feel that it is very successful in that regard. It's actually quite difficult to assess an improvement in terms of just the input from the Book Club Café, because we'd have to isolate that reading from what we're actually doing during class with intensive reading programs and our normal curriculum. So the other thing is that it would take quite a bit of time to do that. So because we've to date only conducted an exploratory practice study, so our results are based on comments, feedback, we should add here that we are investigating the possibility of doing something by way of identifying exactly what the benefits are to the students and quantifying it in terms of their language skills. But one of the difficulties we have is that a lot of our students are not here for a long time, perhaps 5 weeks study tour groups or perhaps 10 or 15 weeks before they enter university, and we probably would have to do this over 1 or 2 years, but that is in the pipeline, and that's something that we intend to explore soon. Okay, you may have had a chance to look quickly at some of those comments from students. These are going back to the early days when we were focusing very much on ER Central, and we've moved well beyond that and now use a much wider variety of sources, although it's highly recommended. It's a fabulous website. It's interesting that many of the students reported that they felt they were allowed to read, allows us to reading regularly. This is verbatim, of course. We know how to write that sentence correctly. It's almost as if we'd given them permission to read. It was quite surprising. So many of them said, I don't know how to do this, but they felt that somehow we'd sort of unlocked some sort of Pandora's box, and here are some books inside, some reading inside. The fact that they had freedom of choice was overwhelmingly the most significant response that we had. I think every single student reported, I like being able to choose. I don't like obligation. I like choosing what I want. Additionally, the fact that they enjoyed the setting in the classroom. And this is not to say that our classrooms aren't normally comfortable and relaxing. I think they are. But we've just sort of taken it up a few notches and tried to, pretend that they're somewhere else. It's not a classroom anymore. I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm just a facilitator. And, here you are. This is your space, your time. You own this. And as Jose mentioned, we had, spectacular participation. Even though there were a few students who didn't actually log in those early days, that isn't to say they didn't go to the ELC and come back with the ILC and come back with a with a graded reader and read a hard copy. There are still a few students who prefer that. And we also have my favourite collocation up there, Vocabulary Joy, which basically I think sums up what a lot of the students are saying about the sessions we have in class. Now, currently, in the last few weeks, we've been conducting the program. Jose and I have been teaching direct entry programs, and the Book Club Café is now embedded in the curriculum. So we conducted a survey the end of, actually just the end of last week, with those much more advanced direct entry students, and who are of course much more analytical and able to express, I think, much more clearly what they perceive as the benefits of such a program. And so we have comments such as, it helped me develop my vocabulary and grammar. I love sharing what I've read with my classmates in a relaxing atmosphere with music and food and coffee. The third one I think is perhaps one of the most exciting. I like the chatting we have on Friday afternoons because it's very relaxing and it's genuine conversation. And we suddenly realized, yes, that's what it is. Because we've had a number of students who, of course we do pair work, we do group work, class discussions, but there are always some students that are quite shy, they're reticent, they don't want to put their ideas forward. We have to encourage them, but still sometimes it can be hard work to bring those students out of themselves. In the Book Club Cafe, we can't shut them up because they are talking about something they're passionate about, or they've read, whether it's basketball or fashion or hairstyles or something. They have a thing about hairstyles today, sorry, but they want to talk. They want to talk about something that they've read and that they really enjoyed and share it. And so there are spin-offs and benefits with their speaking and just general communication. But I think also the last comment, it can help me find the habit of reading. That's really our ultimate goal, is that they'll develop a habit and continue to read. One of the interesting comments we've had from students when they leave is they'll actually ask us if they can keep reading. Is it okay if we keep reading? And we say, of course, this is what we want. This is what we wanted to happen. Just ignite that spark, get it started, and hopefully they'll continue, whether they go to university or they go back to their country, just to try to develop that interest in reading. So we've also canvassed teachers to get some comments from them. I think this first one might strike a few chords. A teacher who said she was impressed and a bit jealous, because I know how many times so many of us have tried to start a reading project. And of course this is true. I'm sure lots of people do this, and probably very successfully, but the problem is that often it's not carried through for more than one teaching block. A teacher leaves, it's not sustained. Other comments that it's become a weekly ritual in the English class. I think this is important. It's regular. The students get used to it, and we basically present this as a complete package, so that the teacher doesn't have to really work to develop anything. It's just there. Pick it up and run with it. If the main purpose of Book Club Café is to generate an interest in reading, then I think it was successful, and this sort of harks back to that comment about the habit. And so we've had very positive comments from teachers and also some really valuable input. So as a result of the exploratory practice study, what we were really examining is how to make a project sustainable and transferable. And I think one of the key elements is that it should be not assessed. I think the dynamic would change enormously. And I know that with some extensive reading projects, particularly some of those that are being conducted in Japan, it is actually an assessable part of their course. But we felt that would actually, it would be counterproductive. It also has to be flexible because, teachers change. We have a fabulous bank of casual teachers who don't always work here every block or every day, but if it's relatively simple and flexible, they can also pick it up quite quickly. Relief teachers, I think I explained it once in 3 minutes to a relief teacher who had come in to take a class when someone was ill. And it worked successfully, and in fact also with a prac teacher who worked with me last year. So as for the follow-up activities, this is, I guess, what we're working on all the time. We're building up this sort of repertoire of activities which we can use, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing with that later. With lower levels, of course, we can have spelling competitions, setting up a class glossary of new words, drawing on the walls, I don't think we've mentioned that. No, it's not that we allow them to destroy the building, but we're very fortunate, thank you, Richard, in that we've got fabulous walls in the classroom and special pens, which the students can use to write the words and then in fact even draw them. For lower levels, it's really good. I had, I think, one class, one student came up with the word hedgehog, and he simply drew a hedgehog on the wall, and it was a great way of teaching vocabulary. Role play, drama, there are lots of activities there. With the higher levels, we're working with more recently, although it's still actually working in the general classes here, it's just that Jose and I are teaching at a different level at the minute. Of course, we can use activities such as summarizing the texts. Sharing reading resources has been really valuable because the students come up with websites and they show us things that they've found and other ways to source material online, and they ask for our opinion and we discuss it, and sometimes we have some great ideas coming from the students themselves. So we feel that they're providing us with a lot of input too. Guessing from the title is a lot of fun, and of course with higher level students we can engage in some critical thinking and actually sit down and discuss those texts which they are bringing along to the Book Club Café. So in terms of its transferability, sorry, we're just having a slight delay here. Sorry. With the sustainability, it's important that we vary the range of online texts and websites that we're using. And I've just given you 3, but there are hundreds out there. News and Levels is excellent. Started with the BBC, and it has different texts at 3 different levels with the transcript, so students can both read and listen. ESL Fast has lots of short, simple texts for lower level students, and there's actually a dearth of material for those lower level students to implement extensive reading at a lower, at an elementary and beginner level is actually quite challenging. But this is one of the resources that we've found which we can use. And ESL Bits is a higher level website with also a range of texts for students to read and listening also. They can listen to a recording of the text. So yes, in terms of its transferability, it's critical that any project is simple to implement. Anything that's really complicated and takes ages to understand how to do it is not good. But we feel it's simple for the teachers and simple for the students. Easy to explain to people. At this point, we're going to talk about the low cost. I would really love to thank our management here at the English Language Centre at Macquarie University for their fabulous support throughout this project and their enthusiasm about it. But I'm sure one of the factors they like about it is the fact that it's so low cost. It doesn't cost us millions of dollars to buy millions of textbooks, millions of graded readers. Because we're using online resources, the resources are free. And the cost is really just the cost of the food, the biscuits, which is pretty low. It also has to be adaptable. This wouldn't work if we kept it the same all the time. So we've reported on earlier phases, but we've changed it quite a bit over time with those different levels and different resources. So where are we going from here? What we really would like to do is establish a community of teachers who are interested in extensive reading. We feel that extensive reading still has a long way to go. Alan Maley calls it the maid in waiting, that it's an untapped resource or an underused resource, and in fact it's critical that we tap into this. So we're in the process of setting up a Book Club Café Facebook page where we'll encourage teachers to contribute ideas and suggestions and just feedback on that page. That's still underway. We're also in the process of setting up the Australian Extensive Reading Association, which will be an affiliate of the Extensive Reading Foundation. There are branches in quite a few countries, but not yet in Australia, but that is underway. So, we welcome and encourage any input and suggestions and support with that. We're also branching into extensive listening and viewing because, in fact, it's really impossible to limit it just to reading. So we're currently conducting a project with extensive listening and viewing here at the Macquarie University English Language Centre. So
as you can see, we have much more to so please stay tuned. And now we're going to move on to answer some questions from the audience. So feel free to pass them on. I believe Apana will send this to us anytime soon now. But if we don't get to answer your questions, feel free to email us at the emails coming up now.
Where have they gone?
Where have they gone? The
I think
emails
we might be stuck. Are we stuck?
No, we're not. We should be seeing them in a second. There you
Oh,
go.
there they are. There they are, our email addresses. Yeah, so please feel free to email us if you have any questions or if you miss out on getting an answer to your question this afternoon.
And we'll also be happy to share the slides if you want to have them as well. So just send us an email with your request and or question.
Yep.
So, Leslie and Jose, thank you so much for that, for talking us through each phase of the project, how you set it up, some of the problems and challenges you encountered, and how you got on top of that. So that was really, really useful and very clear, I think. We do have a few questions and comments coming through. Well, some people are trying to find your Facebook page, I think.
It's not active at the moment, so they're not going to find it just yet.
Okay, I think they're looking for the Australian Extensive Reading Association on Facebook. Is that?
That's not. It's not. We're in the process of establishing it. It has to actually be incorporated before we can start. Before we can actually have people join. We're just flagging it now that this is coming up,
Okay.
and that we're interested in. If anyone was interested, they should send us an email.
Thanks, Leslie. One of the other questions was, what were the ages of the students that participated in the project? And does this, in fact, have any impact on the kind of reading that you provide them and on the project itself?
When we started the project 2 years ago, we had an intermediate group of students, and they were, I would say, between their late teens up to 25. And they were a group of Japanese study tour students with some other students that we have from China and other Asian countries and a few Europeans and South Americans. I don't think that the age would have to interfere or have an impact on what they actually read, the topics. And again, the students are free to select anything they want. And that's what we need to provide, a wide range of online resources. So if we have in one group, for example, a variety of ages, they can still select whatever they want to read. So some of them might want to go on ER Central and choose things from there, or somebody who is a bit older and going into university in direct entry, they may want to select a more advanced online resource, or even go to a library and get an actual book and read from there.
Yes, we're not saying that they can't actually go to print material. We're just trying to get them interested, to get them started, and many of them have actually progressed to joining libraries and borrowing paper books, which is another positive outcome for us.
And someone did point out that there are good resources at city libraries. For example, Melbourne City Library, you can join online for free, and they have an active reading resource which can be accessed free with a member barcode. And I'm sure there are similar initiatives in other cities around Australia as well that you can look into and encourage your students and direct them to. So Leslie. Yes. And Jose, have you ever received any complaints in the setting up phase with students saying that this is outside the curriculum and they might perceive it as a waste of time?
I don't think they've complained that it's outside of the curriculum. I think that sometimes they're still reluctant readers. There are still some students who maybe the level of motivation is very low. But we find that this is the sort of the softest way to get them into it. I mean, one of the quotations from Bamford and Day, which keeps resonating, is reading for gain, not pain. So we try to make it as painless as possible for the students. And we find that even though there may be some students at first who didn't log into the EI Central website, or who sort of flatly refused to borrow a book to read, the Book Club Cafe sessions, because we're generally, we're basically capitalizing on peer group pressure, and if the students are all sitting around talking enthusiastically about something that they've read, that is often enough to get them enthused. So yes, at first there may be some who are reluctant. I don't think anyone's actually ever complained about it as not being.
Yeah, and two more points too. Also, two other important points are that it is not compulsory. So we never got a student saying that this is something that I didn't want to do, or something that I wasn't expecting to do when I joined this center or this course. So something that is voluntary, And also, most of the preparation for this happens outside class time, and the session only lasts for 1 hour.
Or even half an hour. Sometimes we're running it in half an hour. But the thing is that even if they haven't participated, even if they haven't done any reading at all, and sometimes we get a little note passed to us, I'm sorry, teacher, this happened and that happened, and I didn't get a chance to do any extra reading. But they can still sit around in the groups and they can learn some new words. And they see, that there's an advantage for them there. So they still see that as learning.
Mm.
Well, thanks for that, Leslie and Jose. You've just preempted the next question, which is what you do. You've seen it all.
So what happens if they don't?
If the students do not do the reading or choose not to participate in the session, I guess what's key here is it is voluntary. Students choose to participate, but they do a lot of it outside the class and in their groups when they're enjoying their biscuits and exchanging vocabulary and learning as a group. It's so informal. Why not? I mean, they would learn something and take that away, even if they didn't do the reading.
Yes, they can still take part in the spelling games or, guess the title. We have them write the title of a book or the title of an article they've read up on the wall, and they have to all guess what it's about. And so they can still participate by doing that. And, hopefully those less confident or reluctant readers will be inspired to go and do something the following week or even 6 months later.
That's
and as Leslie said before as well, there's peer pressure. We did get the students who at the beginning were not reading, but when they saw that everybody was contributing with new words and titles, they at least read one text per week to just come up with something in the next session they had.
Yep. And I guess this is interesting because a lot of, as you mentioned at the start of the presentation, the normal route that most centers would take is to invest in graded readers. Sometimes they're too long. With rolling intake, sometimes that is not possible for the whole class to read one book. And this, by giving the control to the students and getting them to choose their text, that you've fixed that problem essentially.
Exactly.
One other question is to do with new teachers who come into the project and who are inducted. What kind of advice would you have for them, for someone doing the project for the first time in the class? Yes, they've had a handover. What else could you add to make them more confident in implementing this in their classrooms?
What I basically say in that situation is this has to be fun. It has to, we want the students to actually have fun and enjoy this. So it's very difficult to do the wrong thing. It's actually really hard to stuff this up because it's quite simple. Especially if they're coming in and if a lot of the students are continuing, as long as they are doing some sort of external reading, reading outside of class, or no, in the case of the program we're working on now with listening and viewing, listening to TED Talks, for example, has been really helpful for our more advanced students. As long as they come along and the teacher can, we provide a database of possible activities which they can use. We have that here in the centre, but we're hoping that if we can move on with more communication with teachers Australia-wide, we can share those resources outside of the centre. And if they have some ideas with where they can follow it up, they can always, work on vocabulary or other ideas. We've had great ideas coming from our teachers here. They've been fabulous. So many teachers have taken this on board, and they come to us and say, "Hey, I tried this today," and I say, "Fantastic! As long as the students are having fun in their learning, then they're engaged. It's all good."
That's very reassuring. Thank you, Leslie. If there are any more questions, please do feel free to email Jose and Leslie. They very kindly supplied their email addresses, which you should be seeing on your screens right now. And we don't need to stop this conversation. Please go ahead and try some of these ideas out in your centers. And if any questions, please get in touch. Jose and Leslie, thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. What a delicious recipe. I must also mention that one of the reasons the judges were so impressed with this project, the judges for the awards were so impressed with this project, is in terms of the long-term benefits for students. We really are equipping our students and sending them away from our centers around Australia, to their countries with skills that they will use for the rest of their lives. And this is such a great message for Australian international education. And that is really what this project is about. It's low cost, it has far-reaching implications, and so successful and powerful. Thank you once again for coming and doing this session for us today and sharing your ideas.
Yeah, very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And thanks, everyone, for taking time to attend today. As I said, if any questions, please send them through. Have a nice day and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.